Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut channel. How are you guys doing this fine Saturday? I hope everybody's doing well. Before we get started, I just want to make sure everybody can hear me well. Somebody can reply in the chat. Let's see. Okay, I think we'll get started. So Andrew says, I'm planning to change my car. Which one should I go for? Toyota Corolla or Toyota Avensis or Auris? Which one is more reliable? Unfortunately, in the US, we don't have the Avensis or Auris, but from my understanding, the three cars have different sizes. So I would go with the one that fits your size. Most of these cars will really have the same components, same reliability, and see whichever one fits your size. They're all going to be good cars. And Humberto says, hello from Puerto Rico. Hi, Humberto. I hope you're doing well, brother. So Imad says, do you think the LE trim lower problems than the XLE limited trims in Toyota generally? And then the second question is, RAV4 is the best-selling Toyota vehicle, yet you did not make a video about the RAV4, and I'll tell you about that in a second. So the LE trim will have less options, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a lot more reliable. Obviously, it's going to have less stuff, so you're gonna have less options that could potentially go bad. But I wouldn't say it's a lot more reliable than the XLE. It's just those components or those options that you have on the XLE only will be potential problems, but most cases Toyotas are very reliable. So between the trims, you're not going to have a lot of difference. One car that is, though, is the case. I'm guessing you're talking about RAV4s, but one car that I would say the limited could be an issue is 4Runners with the X3 suspension. They're notoriously leak and they get pretty expensive to fix. So that's one exception. RAV4 is the best-selling vehicle. Yes, I don't have videos. Actually, I was supposed to film a video this week, but I'll update you guys. We're having some issues with the heating in the garage, which hopefully will be resolved this week. And then I'm hoping that is one car that I actually have ready. I just need to bring it in and film with it. So Johnny Lee says 12 Camry with 100K hesitation when shifting from second to third. That is actually a very common problem. And if you've had the torque converter issue fixed or it's not there's no torque converter shutter, that's just a memory reset. The dealership can do that. You do need a capable scan tool to do that. So that really resolves it. I know it feels like there's a problem with the transmission. We've seen technicians actually replace transmissions, and then it's the same thing. Just reset the memory, and that should take care of it. It's really something very simple. And then Imad says, minimal jump of RAV4 Hybrid 2020 when you start or turn off the car. Is that normal? Yes, that is normal, and that is the motive force of the hybrid system. It's totally normal. I wouldn't worry about it. You're actually going to notice this every time the gasoline engine comes off or shuts off. If you turn off the car with the gasoline engine off, you're not going to feel it as much. But every time the engine comes on or goes off, it's going to move some of the planetary, and that's going to create that slight lurch or movement. So sorry guys with the names. I'm going to try my best. Sajitha says, what's the difference between newer generation Camry hybrid technology and the 2017 Camry hybrid technology? Well, the 2017 Camry hybrid technology has the same or similar hybrid system that came out first in the 2010 Prius. So the inverter design is the same. Transmission is similar. That's the previous generation. The new generation came out actually in 2016 Prius. That was the first year for it. It's a lot better. It's a lot more refined. It's lighter weight. It does things a little bit more smoothly. So if you're going for the latest and the greatest, of course, go for the newer generation. They've been reliable so far. We haven't seen much issues with the new generation hybrids. If you want kind of a lower key, maybe less mileage, less efficiency, but more proven, if you would. I mean, they're all really good, but more proven, go with the 17. Thank you for your super chat, Boiled Nuts. Thank you so much. And hope you are doing well as well. Rick P, will the upcoming 2022 Tundra Toyota all-electric SUV have solid-state batteries? So the information on solid-state batteries have been just what you read in the media, but officially Toyota is very quiet on it. They don't like to talk about their upcoming things until they are set and done. But yeah, I will update if I hear anything official that I can share. But so far, there's no details internally shared. And Conrad says, in a 2020 Camry hybrid, where does the hybrid battery's cooling air that enters through the vent under the seat vent out of the bottom of the car? Usually out of the bottom. I don't recall that one exactly. That's a little too new. We haven't had any experience, taking the batteries out. But typically it goes underneath the car, somewhere in the sub body, and it just exits out of the car because they don't want that hot air to linger in the cabin and then get re-enter the battery because they want air-conditioned air from the cabin. So usually it exits out of the bottom of the car. It's usually covered by covers and panels, so it's not like you can get water back in it. But usually it exits out of the car. So Alice says, why would a ZVW30 wheels brake lock on icy roads? No ABS, no ABS sign. So if they lock, the only thing I can think of is if you're at too low speed, the ABS sometimes will not activate as much as when it does in higher speeds. If you have no ABS light, you could still have codes. I would check for codes and go from there on that one. Carlos says, my 2020 RAV4 limited temperature gauge lowers to 3 bars before cold. So if I understand you correctly, when it's cold, it'll lower. So as these cars, as you drive them, if the weather is really cold, like let's say you warmed it up in your driveway, or you're driving around city, and then when you hit the highway and that rush of cold air comes in, sometimes it'll lower the temperature a little bit, and then it'll rise back up. That I'd say would be normal. Let's see. Franz, hello from the Black Forest, Germany. Well, hello to you too, sir. Thank you for joining us. So Mohabir says, Toyota recommends 530, 10W30. Which do I use? So if you have an engine that recommends both, if you live in cold climate, 5W30. If you live in hotter climate, 10W30. But the reality of things is if you use 5W30 all the time, you'll likely be okay. But if you live in really hot climate and your engine is designed to run in 10W30, then use 10W30. Otherwise, 5W30 will be fine. Brian, love your channel. Well, thank you, Brian, for joining the live stream. Gene says, hi, sir. I'm about to leave the country for 4 months. Is it okay for my Corolla hybrid in the parking? Yes. If this is going to be a non-occurring travel where you're only going to park it for 4 months and then you're back to normal driving, it shouldn't be an issue. Disconnect the 12-volt battery so it wouldn't drain down. When you come back, I have a video on things you need to do when you do come back. You do take your car out of storage, and actually some additional things if you're parking it outside. Check that video out. It has all the information I put in one video. But yeah, it'll be okay for the car. Just when you come back, make sure you drive it again so it wouldn't continue to sit. So Ash says, I just bought a 2005 Lexus ES330 140K, and the transmission hesitates all the time. Anything I could do for that? Honestly, at this mileage, I would have to drive it to feel the hesitation to see what's going on. But at this mileage, I would drain and fill the transmission, but I would be a little borderline where I'll tell you comfortably do that. Try to disconnect the battery overnight. That resets the memory on these old ones. See if that improves things. Otherwise, it really need diagnosis in person to know what's going on with it. So Carlos says, RAV4 has been driven for 15 minutes before idle, then lowers to cold. Yeah, going back to that question, as the cold air hits it, it could lower the temperature a little bit, but eventually it'll warm up completely and it'll be fine. That is normal for cars in cold weather. So Wilson says 2007 ES350, when I came to a stop, engine hot, RPMs go as low as 500 and then go back to normal. New spark plugs, throttle body clean, no codes. Also, how to fix the shift flare 2, 3, and 4 to 5. So the idle coming down like that, I would go back and recheck the throttle body. You want to really to make sure it's very clean and there's nothing sticking in the throttle body, because there's no idle air control in these engines. It's all in the throttle body. And that light dip could be normal at some point. I would have to see it, but I would go back in the throttle body because that's really what controls everything. And the shift flare really is on these at least, could be fluid level. I would check the fluid level. But if the fluid level is good and the fluid is clean, unfortunately, we've seen some shift flares with that generation transmission, and there's not much you can do. It's just not shifting fast enough so you get that flare until it shifts into the next gear. It would need, the valve body inspected and then see what's sticking, what accumulator is sticking, and go from there. David says, how often should I change the seal transmission fluid in the 5th generation 4Runner? So every 60,000 or 6 years. That keeps it at the safe level where it never really gets super dirty and cause shifting issues. And RL Studio says 2016-18 Prius 4th generation motors free of the head gasket issues. Yes, so far they have been free of the head gasket issues. I haven't seen any cases, and actually even 2015 Prius, the previous generation, notably, it has been a lot better at the head gasket issues. I've seen very few 14s, a lot 2010, 11, especially now. I mean, they're a lot, and it's alarming a little bit. Shastri says, I have a Fielder wagon from Japan. The instrumental displays in Japanese. Is there any way I can change it to English? Unfortunately, I'm not very familiar with that exact model, but on the conversions, if you can't find a model that, like, let's say you bought a car from Japan, and if that same car is not made in another market where there is an English instrument panel, unfortunately, you won't be able easily, at least from an OEM standpoint, to change it to English. Otherwise, you'd want to look at someone that can program these and change it over to English. So Andrew says, I have a 2020 4Runner Limited, 5,000 miles. The front differential was replaced. Is this common in these trucks? I have noise in the front and rear in this truck. Dealership says it's common. Yes. One thing I will say about the 4Runners, especially the Limited is very nice and it's a nice trim, but it's still a truck. It has a live rear axle and a live front differential as well. They're going to make some noise. It's not an issue. It's more of an annoyance. The front differential on the 4Runner is notorious to make some noise. Some of them had a needle bearing that needed replacement. Some of them the whole differential. But for the most part, if the noise is faint and the car is under warranty, you could get it replaced under warranty. But just know that this is one thing with these things, because it's a live rear axle. It's going to make noise at some point. Doesn't mean there's a problem. It's just the way the gears mesh together. They're going to make more of a harmonic whine, if anything, I would call it a whine more than a noise. So Ralph says, I bought a 2021 Highlander hybrid. I live in the Rust Belt. Should I rust proof the underneath? Now, the new Toyotas, the unibody, the TNGA ones, the ones with the new chassis, they have a lot of coverings underneath them already from the factory, like plastic covering almost the whole body. In this case, I personally wouldn't, because I'd rather you wash the car regularly and use a car wash that just sprays underneath the car. And usually Rust Belt states, those are available almost everywhere. But it wouldn't hurt to rust proof it if you want, but the benefits are not going to be as much as, say, an older Toyota where everything was wide open underneath it. But yeah, folks, I've been noticing an uptick in Viewers asking me, is it okay to rust-proof a hybrid? It is 100% okay to rust-proof a hybrid. There's nothing different about them. Yeah, the high voltage cable on some models will run underneath the car, but it's well insulated. That cable is designed to withstand all the weather conditions. So having rust proofing over it's not going to affect anything. So rust proofing a hybrid is exactly the same as your non-hybrid. So there's no special precautions or anything. Michael says, looking to buy a first generation Venza, is the 2.7 or 3.5 any more reliable than the other? Also, the same question with front wheel drive versus all wheel drives. All wheel drive, more money to maintain and fix an issue if an issue arises. Honestly, with the Venza, and this is some people will disagree, I would never buy the four cylinder. The four cylinder is notorious to burn oil on these, and if you're buying, obviously you can't buy this new anymore, but unless you find that one that was maintained really well, they always come in with no oil in the dealership, and it just gets annoying after a while because you don't know if you're buying this car, if it's good, if it's not, if it's been maintained or not. Safest option is to go with the 3.5. It has more power, gets good gas mileage. I mean, the 2.7 doesn't really get great gas mileage in the first generation Venza, but I would definitely go for the 3.5. All-wheel drive, they're reliable, but they're notorious for rear differential leaks. And you replace the axle seals, and then 3 years later, again, and again, and again. It's something notorious with these. It's a little bit of a high labor to replace the axle seals because you got to disassemble some of the suspension. And if this is a rust belt car, things can kind of go up from there. So the front wheel drive will be cheaper to maintain overall, but the all wheel drive is a good option if you live in snow, if you live in the rust belt, for example. And it's more to maintain. Obviously, you have now the transfer case to service and the differential, but it's not extremely more high, especially if you're needing that all wheel drive for daily driving. But 3.5 front wheel drive for overall reliability, all-wheel drive if you need it, just know there's going to be some additional costs. Larry Page says, I saw a comparative oil analysis indicating some differences between newer and older formulations of WS flashpoints and additives. Any problems mixing those two? I'm not aware actually of a change. Toyota did not disclose any change. They make changes here and there, but not something official where it's a different part number and different, hey, we've updated the fluid. So I don't see a problem mixing the two because at a dealership level, we did not get notified of any change in the fluid itself. So I wouldn't worry about mixing them. Brian says, my 2007 2.4 has 395,000 miles. I would love to get a picture of that mileage, by the way. How much longer I have left? Honestly, that's a tough question to answer because cars usually, when they get really high mileage, the first big thing that goes, like, let's say you get to over 400,000 miles and the transmission goes. Well, between you and me, it's not that point because the car has so much miles. You're going to put a new transmission, and then what if the engine goes next? I mean, it's high miles. Even for a Toyota, that's a lot of miles. So honestly, with cars like that, they don't have much retail value anymore because I don't know that if a lot of people that would jump to buy a 400,000 mile car, regardless how good it is, how well it's been maintained. So retail value is not good. So for you've likely taken care of this car. That's why it got into this mileage. I would drive it till the wheels fall off, literally, or something huge happens, like trans goes out, engine goes out, something breaks that it's going to cost a lot of money to fix, then it's not worth it. But if the car is driving and it's fine, I'll just keep driving it and not worry about that mileage. You'd be surprised how much you're going to get out of that car. Bill says, can you help me find a hood lift kit for a 2011 Highlander? So a hood lift kit, I'm trying to imagine what purpose would that serve, but do email me because that will require a little bit of research. By the way, guys, speaking of emails, I'm looking right now on my laptop. I have 273 emails to answer. I'm a lot behind on emails. Believe it or not, I'm still answering emails from the end of January. Unfortunately, got caught up with filming, family, and work and everything. Do send me an email, but do give me some time to get back to you. All right. Bartos says, are the gear ratios in the 2020 Camry front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive the same? They should be the same, but I would have to look up these numbers to give you a definitive answer with numbers. Sammy says, hi, AMD, a pleasure to be in your live stream today. Thank you for the great content. Well, thank you so much, Sammy. I really appreciate you watching my videos and joining the live stream. Daniel says, I had a recall done on my 14 Prius V with 80K. It was a hybrid system update shortly after I had a new hybrid battery installed. Would I need the system updated again? No. So the update, and I'm assuming this is the JOV, I believe it's called recall, that would be not in the hybrid battery. It's going to be actually in the inverter assembly and the hybrid ECU. And by the way, when you replace hybrid batteries, unless you've gotten a complete unit, we do not replace the computer. The computer gets swapped over. It's just the actual battery pack that gets replaced. So no, I don't think you do need the update again. Craig says, any concern with hybrids in very cold climate, both in terms of longevity and efficiency? So hybrids with cold climate, unless the weather outside is, let's say, -25 Fahrenheit, and you're gonna park this car for 2 months at that, then things would start being really bad. But if you're driving this car daily, it's not a problem. It's gonna have some effects on the battery because it's too cold. Of course, cold weather has an effect on any battery, not just the high voltage battery. But it's not as bad as very hot weather, because batteries, they do better in cold than they do in very hot weather. So I wouldn't worry about the longevity of it. It's still going to be, I mean, I'm from Chicago. We see batteries last 10, 15 years all day long. That's normal. But if in terms of what you can do to help it, try not to park the car for a long time. Don't store it outside. If you're driving this daily, I wouldn't worry about it. It'll be okay. You will not affect the longevity too much. So T says, will DIY oil change, fluid change, brakes, pads, rotors, etc. invalidate manufacturer warranty, as stated many times in the owner and warranty guides? So one thing about that question, that's going to vary between your area and how the laws are written. But generally, if, say, your radio went out and you took it in for a warranty, they're not going to ask you for oil change receipts, because that's not related. That has nothing to do with that. But let's say your engine went out and you had a knock or something big happened like that. And even then, if the technician has no reason to believe that this was neglect, like the engine is clean, the oil looks clean, there's no signs of bad maintenance, I don't see a reason why they would say, well, I need to see oil maintenance records. Usually extended warranties are the ones that ask for that, because they know most people don't keep their maintenance receipts. They try everything to get out of the of covering things, but unless it's directly related to it, it wouldn't be an issue. But I'll give you an example. You did an oil change and you used a very bad filter, counterfeit, for example. I get the car has oil starvation or whatever issue it has, and I see that there is a non-original, unquestionable quality filter. I'm going to immediately tell you, who did this oil change? I would like to see the receipt. You say you did it yourself, that could be a problem, because then we don't know when was this oil change done and where was this actual source of this filter. But in another side, if you actually maintain your car right and you're doing everything right, you would not have issues to begin with. So it wouldn't really invalidate the manufacturer's warranty. But remember, it will always be according to the situation and what you are fixing under warranty. All right. So Fishing Guy says, 2021 Tacoma Limited 4x4. Please share what you recommend miles for fluid change on the transmission, transfer case, rear end, etc. So on the transmission, I would do 60K miles and 6 years. On the differential, front differential, rear differential, and transfer case, I would do it initially every 30,000 miles, and then after that initial change, you could do it every 30 to 60,000 miles. The fluid will still be not too dirty, not too concerning, but the first replacement always seems to have the most shavings and everything. The subsequent replacements are not as much. So Aussie Skater says, why does my Corolla hybrid engine make a half-second rattle on first cold start of the day? Now, that rattle could be from the engine or it could be from the hybrid drive. These engines, when they start, they do cause some shaking in the hybrid system, and you could have one rattle, like a very, like literally 1 second rattle from the planetary gear inside the transmission. If there's no codes and if the car is maintained, and the one thing that causes these is very cold weather and oil in the intake. If the car has ever had oil overfilled, oil in intake, just take the intake, open the throttle body, look inside. If you see a lot of oil puddle, I recently posted a picture on Instagram on a Prius that was over a quart full, and the intake was full of oil, and it was misfiring. It would actually misfire a lot when you first started. When the gasoline engine first comes on, it'll rattle a lot. But one quick rattle is not an issue, but I would just make sure everything else is okay. So Carlos says, RAV4 was driven for 15 minutes and the temp gauge normal. Then vehicle is left on idle and the temp goes to 3 bars before cold. Is this normal? Yes, that is normal, because if the weather is cold and you have the heat full blast, it's gonna bring the temperature down a little bit. So Sydney W, how to find a mechanic who knows how to inspect and work on Toyota hybrids? So that's a very good question. The question is, though, I have for you is, what are you doing to this car? Hybrids are normal cars for other maintenance items, like brakes. If you're just replacing brakes and pads, if you're doing suspension work, if you're doing anything on the engine side, things that are normal, you wouldn't need a specialist to do that work. But if you have anything related to the hybrid system, like battery diagnosis, after accident diagnosis, for example, wiring issues, things of that nature, you would need somebody who's a specialist, someone who knows the hybrid system so they can work on it. But if you don't know a mechanic who is comfortable, who is trained, usually you're not going to get a lot of outside dealership mechanics that are trained specifically on hybrids and updated. But sometimes you'll find shops that has an ex-dealership mechanic that works in them, and they will say that we are hybrid certified because this technician came out of a dealership and they were trained by the dealership, by Toyota directly, to work on hybrids. And then he left the dealership. Now he works in an independent shop or his own shop maybe. But otherwise, it's really hard to know a mechanic is good unless you've tried them. So if you find a good mechanic, stick with them and you will have no issues. Renee says, hey, love your channel. Thank you so much for watching my videos, Renee. I just bought a 17 Highlander with 26,000 miles and noticed it had 1 oil change per year. Should I use an engine flush? Also noticed a slightly rough idle. So 2 things. First, this car has such low miles. It's only 3 to 4 years old. I'm not concerned about an engine flush yet. I would just continue the oil changes every 6 months, 5,000 miles, and that should take care of things and you would have no issues. And also on the rough idle. Now, these engines, the 2G RFKS, the one with the dual injection, when it switches between the two, and especially when you're in direct injection and you're at idle, it's going to shake a little bit more than normal. That could be normal. I don't want you to waste your money, go have someone look at it and pay them a diagnostic fee, and then to come back and tell you, well, that's normal, we found nothing. So keep an eye on it. If it does get worse, then I would look into it. If you have a check engine light or something of that nature, then yes. But if everything looks smooth, I wouldn't worry about it. Johnny, thank you so much for your super chat, sir. All right. James says, how often should you change the RAV4 hybrid intake filter if it's cleaned? Every 6 months. Honestly, you can keep going with these filters for a pretty long time, unless you get to a point where the filter is coming apart because it's a paper filter on that RAV4. If it's coming apart, then I would replace it, but otherwise just clean it and keep going. You'll have no issues. All right. So Mark says, my 2016 Corolla seems to jerk after stopping at a stop sign and pressing the gas pedal. Does a CVT grab or jerk like that? Honestly, I would have to drive it to feel it. The CVT operation is, for the most part, smooth. Taking off from a dead stop could be a little not smooth, if you would. But honestly, on that one, I would have to drive it. CVTs, when they have issues, they usually have issues as they rev up. Like you'll get shaking, or it'll start like disengage and then engage again. I haven't seen much issues from taking off. Okay. So someone asked about a code for a 16 Camry hybrid. I would need to look up the code information. So if you don't mind, send me an email on that. And James says, do you expect Toyota to improve all-wheel drive in future hybrid model, possibly torque vectoring? I don't know if I want them to do that, honestly. We've had some issues with torque vectoring on the newer RAV4s. It's very possible, and I think they could do torque vectoring if they put two motors, each motor drive each wheel, and then they really have the control. I don't know. We'll wait and see on that one if they want to add torque vectoring. But the cool thing about hybrids is that they have infinite control over how the four-wheel drive works. I mean, it could drive in front-wheel drive 100%. I don't know if they do rear-wheel drive only. Probably not. But yeah, we'll wait and see on the torque vectoring if they decide to add it on hybrids. So Dedney Gonzalez says, thank you for your super chat, sir, and thank you. I will always do my best to help you guys as much as I can. So RL Studio says, when should I change my 2016 Prius spark plugs? I'm at 77K miles. 120, I believe, on this one. 120,000 miles or 10 years, so you still have some way to go. Matthew says, 2021 RAV4 LE, any issues with the latest version of the SUV? Other than the never-ending remote connect and remote start issues, no, all the issues seems to have been resolved. I haven't seen any other issues like the previous models. The video is ready to go for this one. I just have to finish filming it. But yeah, the only issues you're going to have is remote connect and radio issues. The LE might not have all the features of the remote connect. That's why you won't see as much of the issues. But folks, with the new safety connect, we're having a lot of issues right now. Remote start not working, account problems. It's just endless a little bit. They're trying to figure out a better way to handle all this stuff. So Ikan says, just got my Sienna 2021 hybrid. Well, congratulations. What would be the break-in period? Hold on, where did this question go? Here it is. What would be the break-in period to change the engine oil, and what else to check at that time? So if you're going to go with the break-in oil change, I personally do it. I think it's a good idea. It's not required by Toyota as part of the maintenance, but if you're going to do that, I would change the oil at 1,000 miles and just oil filter and call it a day. There's not really much else you want to check or do. And other break-in stuff, just take it easy on the car generally. Try to avoid long trips with cruise control. And with hybrids, it's a little bit easier because the engine doesn't run all the time and it doesn't hold constant RPM like a gasoline model would. But that would be about it if you're going to do the oil change at 1,000 miles. So, No Scott, thank you so much for your super chat, sir. Tire, I recently got a set of Goodyear tires on my Scion TC 2012, but when I put the PSI air pressure that's on the door, I feel like it's dragging. What's wrong? Adding more makes it better. So that's going to depend on your tires, and I see you got Goodyear tires. if you're going to set the pressure, I try to keep it below 40. If you set it at 35 and things are better, that's okay. You can deviate a little bit from the manufacturer recommended pressure, because again, it is not a required pressure, it's a recommended pressure. As long as you don't exceed, when the tires are fully warmed up, you're not exceeding the tire manufacturer's recommended maximum pressure, I think you'll be okay. So let's say your recommended pressure is 32 and you find the car drives much better at 36. You're okay at 36, but at 36, even in the hottest weather, you're probably going to end up with 40 psi, maybe 41. Lowest tire I've seen is 44 psi max, so you're still within the safe zone. But just know, if you increase the tire pressure, the car will drive nicer, but potholes will also a lot likely more damage the tire than the lower pressure. So try to keep the pressure at a point where you're not over the maximum. And Prince Alberts, thank you so much for your super chat. What do you think about the new RAV4 Prime? I've been thinking about trading in my 2012 Camry Hybrid. So I really like the new RAV4 Prime. I'm actually considering buying one myself. The only thing I don't like about the RAV4 Prime is it has nothing to do with the RAV4 Prime side of things. It's just the RAV4. By the way, guys, this has been circulating all over the internet. The RAV4 and the RAV4 Prime are exactly the same car. There is, yes, the Prime side of things, and the range is higher. Some of the software is different, and some of the menu options are different. But the car otherwise is exactly the same as a non-Prime. It's the same chassis, same gasoline engine, same size and storage and everything. So whatever you don't like about a non-hybrid, non-Prime RAV4 that's related to the body or the size or the layout of everything, it's going to be exactly the same as the RAV4 Prime. So what I'm trying to tell you here, if you can't get yourself get a hold of a RAV4 Prime to test drive, but you want to see the general size, so go look at a regular RAV4. They're going to be exactly the same size and exactly the same layout of everything generally. But I think it's a very nice car. Other things I don't like about it, I'm sorry, I got sidetracked there. The road noise. They're a little bit on the loud side. And the RAV4 has historically always been a little bit loud. I personally love a quiet drive, so that would be something that would bother me personally. And the other thing is the availability of the RAV4. I don't like the whole Tesla deal with you got to order a car and wait a while to get it. I want you to go test drive a car and then pay for it and take it home. So until the RAV4 Prime becomes more available on dealership lots, I don't think I will make the move to buy it. Otherwise, it's a fantastic car as long as you don't treat it like an EV. Some people will do that, and they will not believe me, and they will have issues. But if you drive it as a electric hybrid car and regularly use that gasoline engine, you're not going to have an issue with it. Okay, let's go back here. Let me just find where we were. Okay, so Eric says, I bought an 04 Lexus ES330, 148,000. It has the original spark plugs. Should I get the spark plugs replaced along with the coolant plate, knock sensor, PCV valve, and valve cover gaskets? So I would get the plugs done, and the coolant plate, if it's leaking, get it done. If it's not, I wouldn't go there. If you're doing this work yourself, absolutely go for the coolant plate. And the knock sensors, usually the knock sensors don't go bad. Usually it's the wire that breaks right underneath. It's right on top. If you're going to do the coolant plate, definitely put new knock sensors and wires. But if you're going to leave the coolant plate alone, I wouldn't worry about the knock sensors and the wires, because one day when you do eventually go to the coolant plate, then put the knock sensors or wires. Valve covers, absolutely, I would do with the spark plugs. You're right there. It's might as well get it done one shot. And the PCV valve you can actually get done without taking anything out on this engine. But if you're there, you're gonna get the valve cover out. Just put a new PCV valve. One thing about PCV valve on this car, make sure you buy an original one. I've seen so many of these engines. The 3MZ has oil consumption because of bad aftermarket PCV valve. It's not worth it. The PCV valve is a few bucks. Buy it from the dealership. Okay. So Eric, you're asking what else would I recommend? Honestly, it looks like you've gotten it pretty covered while you're there. Maybe clean your throttle body really well because you'll have it out. Might as well clean it. Otherwise, I think you're all set. Make sure you replace every single gasket though that you take out during this job. So Gino Rodriguez says, how bad is P0517 error code and what are you usually done to fix this? 07 Camry hybrid. Do send me an email with the code. I'll get back to you because I got to look into the code and see what do we got. But nothing that right off my memory to tell you about it. Okay, let's see here. So Fico Hyper, thank you so much for your super chat, sir. Have a Camry SE 19. RPM goes up and down only when operating temperature. AC off in parking. Clean mass airflow and throttle body, but didn't work. Dealership sec is the fuel pump recall causing it. That's very possible, and I've seen that exact scenario with a bad fuel pump. So usually though you'll get some performance issues, and eventually you'll get codes. If the fuel pump recall has not been done, I would get it done. Folks, I've seen people trying to delay. Oh, I don't want to go. I don't want the dealership doing this to my car, that to my car. Safety recalls are safety issues. And Toyota does so much to try to get everybody that has an open safety recall on their car to get their car as soon as possible to the dealership, get it fixed, and be done with it. You do not want to wait too much on safety recalls because eventually that fuel pump is going to stop working and you're going to be stranded somewhere. But one thing I will say about the fuel pump recall that also a lot of viewers have said, this is a one-time repair. You're only going to fix it once and you're done. The new fuel pump that's going in the car is not a faulty one. That's why it's a recall. It wouldn't make sense to replace a bad part with a bad part. You're replacing a bad part with a good part that goes back to normal Toyota business of even the car in the junkyard rotting away has a good fuel pump. So I would get that fuel pump done as soon as possible. I've seen that random idle and overall poor running conditions. It's because of that dual injection system. When you're running on direct injection, you can actually disconnect the fuel pump and the car will run for a significant amount of time just because of the high pressure of that system. So Kevin Opar, thank you so much for your super chat, sir. I may buy a new 2020 Highlander hybrid. It is on sale due to the last year model year. It has been sitting in the same spot all winter, cold upstate New York with 2 miles on the odometer. Should I worry? I wouldn't, because it's too new and it does have the same. When you buy a new car that is old stock like this one that's been sitting, it will have the exact warranty that will of let's say a brand new car that was made yesterday from the day you buy it. So I wouldn't worry. Actually, you can get really good deals on these last year models if you would. Okay, let's go back. So Renee says transmission flush or drain and fill. I usually like drain and fill is safer. Flush is good if it's done right. If this is a dealership doing it, they usually know better because they've been burned by this. They do check the fluid level afterwards. So either or, you're good. If you're within the miles for the replacement. How reliable? So Sasky says, how reliable is the 1GR FE engine? I'm assuming you're referring to the Tacoma and 4Runner. Now, there's two versions of this engine. There's the old one and there's the new one. The old one for DIY mechanics, the oil filter is at the top. The new one, the oil filter is at the bottom. Now, the old one did have some issues, have more issues than the new style one. The new trending issue is Head gasket leaks. That's becoming somewhat common with this engine. I think it has to do with poor maintenance. Coolant was never replaced. The cooling system was never serviced. The fan clutch was not good. Possibly the car was overheated, but we're seeing a lot of those now, alongside oil leaks from the front cover. But the new style engine, which is still being made today in the current generation 4Runner, that one's been very solid. They've had some issues with the air, secondary air injection, but they're not significant enough where I tell you they're a problem. If you're buying an old one, you got to make sure this thing's been taken care of. Otherwise, the problems do get pretty ugly when they get old and neglected with these. So Jesus Sanchez says, Toyota Camry 2020 has a very strange noise coming from the engine on cold start, then goes off after the car warms up. I heard it comes from a direct injection. Is this true? Yes. So the direct injectors are very loud. There's nothing you can do about that. That is normal for these cars until the direct injection switches over to port injectors. They're going to be very loud, and there's not much you can do about them. That's normal. But to put your mind at ease, find a similar Camry, listen to it, and you'll see that they make exactly the same noise. So for you to know that there's actually no problem with your car. Hostility says, question about the new Tacoma 2GRFKS engine oil. The same engine in other countries states 5W30. Why is 0W20 only recommended option in the US? I don't have a direct answer for that one. Possibly emissions, fuel economy. On the 2GR, though, you could use 5W30 safely without issues. 5W20 would be better, but 5W30 is absolutely fine. If you're in cold weather, though, I would stick with that 0W20. And you'll have no issues with these engines. William Castillo, thank you so much for your super chat. God bless you as well, sir. Let's see here. Mafitron says, I got a 14 Corolla 55K. It randomly shakes hard while idle in a stop. Any ideas? Clean the throttle body. That would be the first thing I would do. With Toyotas, by the way, I'm planning to make a video once my heater situation is fixed in the garage. Toyota throttle bodies, clean them, call it a day. It's going to idle a little bit high. Give it a few days. It'll settle. But there's no calibration like Nissan's. There is nothing else you can do. You need to do after cleaning the throttle body other than drive it and let the idle settle. So Patrick says, hello from Sweden. Hello, sir. Can I exchange a 12-volt battery in the 19 Corolla Hybrid for a live PO4? You can, absolutely, with no issues. I mean, you could go a bigger battery, you can go a different style battery, as long as it fits and it's the right terminal configurations, there is no issues. Just don't put a smaller battery than the original one. Let's see here. James the engineer. I owe you more than $5 for all your previous videos. Requesting future maintenance videos using your quick jack, preferably on a 4Runner. You got it. Actually, I need to get more 4Runners in here and more trucks in general. I'm actually thinking of a truck week where we're only going to be talking about trucks, 2-3 videos, maybe a live stream. But 4Runners are very available to me. I can get a few 4Runners, and let me know. I always read the chat till the end later on, even when we don't get to it in the live stream. But write any ideas you have for specific jobs you want to see on a 4Runner, and I'll get to them. I really appreciate your super chat, sir. So, Brian, greetings from Montana, Japan Toyota only. You got it. Video on the Japan versus USA is planned. I want to get to that one. That is a hot topic. So, Martin de la Fuente says, my 2010 Corolla S makes a rattling noise in cold start and is progressively getting worse. What do you recommend to do with it? I would, honestly, if the rest of the car is good, it's in good shape, and you plan to keep this car longer, I would fix it. I mean, it's VVTi gears. Don't replace just the intake. Replace both gears, and you won't have this issue again for a very long time. Otherwise, if the car is not in good shape and you're selling it, do disclose that it has these issues. I think you want to be upfront and honest with whoever's buying it, or reflect it on the price to begin with. But do compare how much it's going to cost you to fix it. Depends on your area and how much labor and the general cost of it. It's not cheap, but again, this car is 11 years old. If it's had nothing really done to it, maybe it is worth fixing it and driving it for more years. So Fika Hyper says, have two brand new cases of M1 filters, N1 filters, and F2 filters. Can I use those on new drive force engines, or would I need to use N1? So you can use the F2. I mean, honestly, the F2 was recently replaced by the N1 filter. You can use the F2s, they're not a problem. We've used them on the dynamic force, and there's no issue. I believe cost has something to do with the switch. That's just my personal opinion, because the N1 is slightly smaller than the F2, but the F2 has been around for a very long time, and it has been used on the dynamic force engine. So I would use them, no problem. Use the F2s first, be done with them, then N1 is going to be the one going forward. So Ivan says, have a Corolla 2020 electric heat before engine heat up. I don't understand your question exactly, but electric heat before engine heat up, I'm thinking you mean block heaters. Block heaters are always good if you live in extreme climate. I would use a block heater, like if you live in an area where it's always in the negative temperature and the car is parked outside, then definitely use a block heater. Bill Ward says, oil catch cans, good or bad? They're good, but the problem is most new engines, they have a oil separator, which essentially does the same thing. So putting an oil catch can with an engine that has an oil separator, it's not a problem, but it's overkill, I think. And a lot of the new Toyota engines, they do have an oil separator. So Troy says, we'll take in delivery of my new 21 Tacoma off-road and plan on changing the oil at 5,000 to AMSOIL. Should I change my rear differential fluid at that time also? At 5,000 miles, the fluid will be new, basically, on the differential. I would wait till the first replacement. I usually recommend you replace it at 30,000 miles for the first replacement of the differential fluid. At that time, you can use AMSOIL. AMSOIL makes great oil, a little bit on the pricey side, but it's worth it. I would make the change on the first replacement, not necessarily right away at 5,000 miles. You wouldn't hurt anything, but that's my opinion. That's what I would do if I were in your situation. So LY says, what are your thoughts on the 2020 Corolla SE manual transmission? Can you comment on the M20A FKS engine? Any issues, reliability? So the 2021 Corolla manual trans is actually awesome and drives really nice with that, especially with that engine. They're very reliable. The CVT transmission is also reliable, but obviously a manual trans is always more reliable than any automatic transmission. On the M20A FKS, folks, that engine is exactly the same as the A25A, which is a 2.5 variant of that same engine. Same technology, same everything. We really had zero issues with these engines. The only ones that we've had issues with were the very early A25s. A few of the motors went out. Some people put the wrong oil on them and caused some issues. But reliability-wise, they've been very reliable. And Corollas, usually they get high miles easy. I think we've already seen 100,000-mile Corolla with that engine, and nothing, just oil changes. So Sasuke says, should I change the transmission filter on a second-generation Tacoma with 261,000 miles? I still wouldn't, honestly. If you're doing this yourself, sure. But one thing I'll warn you about about the transmission pan on Tacomas, that we're starting to see this problem. If this is a Rust Belt car, there's a high chance that when you take that oil pan down, the bolts will break, and then it turns into a big nightmare. If this is a Rust Belt car, I would not touch the oil pan. It's not worth replacing that filter. If you're doing this yourself, you can't do any harm replacing the filter, but just know you're not gaining a lot of benefit either. So Brian says, are they going to keep making the Prius? I want a Prime. I don't think the Prius is going anywhere anytime soon because it has been the mother of hybrid cars, and every new hybrid technology has come out in the Prius first, then went to everybody else. The Prius Prime is actually a great value for a car, especially if you're buying this. I don't know if you're buying it new or not. If you're buying it used, it's huge value because the prices are really good for them. Mark says, what is the best way to accelerate my hybrid to reach the best eco rating? Pushing the gas pedal moderate in eco range or accelerate in power, then release the pedal. There's two schools of thoughts on that. Yeah, there's the hyper milers that, what is it, pulse and glide. You accelerate hard and then you let go. And then there is the just take it easy overall. That gets the best gas mileage. For me, I think if you really want to get the best eco rating, start in EV mode, and then as you get to 20-25 miles an hour, then switch to gas, then it'll go out of EV mode, and then just generally taking it easy will get you the best eco score. Pulse and glide, you can try it, but Pulse and glide has one thing it's more of a you're fooling the computer, but you're actually not getting good gas mileage, so don't overdo that. 2000 Jose says 2019 4Runner, AMS oil, XL, and TRD oil filters. Any thoughts? Honestly, the TRD oil filter, yeah, it's great. I have to say that because it's sold by Toyota, but I would put the original filter, AMS oil filter. It's a good filter, but if it costs, in my book, if it costs more than the original filter that you buy from the dealership, the A5, it has no other value. It's a better oil filter, but the original filter does the same job, so you're not really accomplishing much there. But more importantly than the oil filter is the interval that you're changing it out. I'd much rather you buy potentially the cheaper original filter and consider changing your engine oil every 5,000 than go with an expensive filter and expect it to do better in longer term. So Jay says, hi, MD, great videos. Thank you for watching. What do you think of a 2005 Avalon? Is it a good car? I've got 143,000 miles on it. Thank you. So the 05 Avalon is a great car, but when they came out, that was the first year in Toyota land that had the 2GRFE engine, and they had a lot of problems in that year. One of them is the VVTi gears coming apart, oil leaks, coolant leaks from the head gasket. If you're still driving this car at 143,000 miles at this age, likely all these problems have either been fixed or you never had them. These are really nice cars. I've actually owned an Avalon of that generation. They're really nice cars, very reliable overall. Toward the end of their life, they tend to start falling apart a little bit. Suspension, oil leaks, coolant leaks. It gets a little bad toward the end. But as far as them driving, they will continue to drive, but just make noise, not be very stable, and leak oil all over the place. But they're really good cars. Paul C says, I have a 16 RAV4 SE with the HD headlights, but I can't remove the cover to get access to the bulb. I twist counterclockwise as hard as I can, and it won't come close. Do I need a special tool? You do not need a special tool, but perhaps use a towel or something to turn that cover off. They tend to be very tough to open. I agree with you. They have an O-ring, they get stuck, and it makes it really hard to turn. But put a big towel on it and try to spin it. That gives you a little bit more traction and a little bit less damage to your hand, if you would, when you turn it, and that should help it. So Shastri says, my car calls for 0W16, which is hard to get sometimes. Can I use 0W20 all the time? Well, you want to read your owner's manual. If it specifically says use 0W16 and you can substitute for 0W20, but the next oil change go back to 0W16, I would stick with the 0W16. Using 0W20 is better than, say, using 10W30, but if and when possible, 0W16 is the way to go for this engine. So Sajitha says, my 2019 Camry have a nickel metal hybrid battery, but the new facelift model comes with a lithium-ion battery. What's the difference? So actually, the new facelift model does not come with a lithium-ion battery. It's the LE model that does. So 2018 and up, LE Camry Hybrid will come with a lithium-ion. Everything else will come with a nickel metal. I have a video that I'm working on that will explain the differences, and there is advantages to the lithium-ion battery, but there's also disadvantages. So you're going to want to know which one is which in this case. Really, the nickel metal hybrid, most people want the latest and the greatest, but the nickel metal hydride battery, it's been around for so long and it's proven and true. If you take care of it, it's going to take care of you. And lithium ion, they have advantages, but most of their advantages are really in the weight department. And we'll wait and see how reliable they are 10 plus years from now. So Ivan says there are many discussions about fuel E10. Is it dangerous for the 2020 Corolla and other models hybrid? So E10 fuel has 10% ethanol, and it's actually available everywhere in the United States. It's all over the place. It does harm if you keep it in the car and store it like that, but daily driving, it's not dangerous. You can use it. Most hybrids are okay for up to 15% ethanol, so 10% is okay. It's within the limits. So Sean David says, "08 Avalon rack and pinion. Is there anything that can be done to make it last longer? It went out at 112,000 and had fluid change 2 times prior at 65K and at 105K. Not really. These Avalons are notorious for rack and pinion leaks. The only thing you can make your rack and pinion last another 112,000 miles is to buy an original one. They're very expensive. I hear you, but I would just replace it with a good one. Unfortunately, this one it's going to happen again, and that's just the reality of these Avalons. So No Scott says, speaking of TRD have an intake with a drop in the air filter that looks identical to the K&N filter. Does Toyota actually R&D these filters for reliability, or am I losing reliability for performance? I wouldn't say you're losing reliability, but the division that does these accessories, TRD, it's a separate division, but it is still within the Toyota family. They're not going to make an accessory that is sold officially under the Toyota name with a feature that would decrease reliability. But do they perform better? They do, but not at a level where it's very noticeable. So usually with TRD accessories, I am one that always says, is it really worth it? The extra expense? I don't know. That's really up to you, but I personally wouldn't use TRD filters per se, or even the K&N one. I really don't like. All right, let's find where we were. So Joseph says, just change my timing chain tensioner gasket on my 1.8 Scion IM. For what I read, this is a common failure point on these engines. Do you recommend putting red RTV silicone or gasket prior to install? If you're just doing the tensioner, the chain tensioner, I would not use any RTV. Make sure, though, there's one thing that causes these to re-leak. So the gasket on that tensioner is a metal gasket, and when you take it off, sometimes some pieces of the coating of that gasket stays on the surface where the tensioner goes. If you don't scrape away that, it's going to leak again. It's probably going to leak worse. But it's not as common to leak from the tensioner. It looks like it's leaking from the tensioner, but a lot of times it's actually the front timing cover. So if you've installed the tensioner and everything looks good, and then 3 months down the road you have the leak again, it's probably the front timing cover. It's very common on these, actually. Not much on the Scion IM, but on that engine is very common. So it wouldn't surprise me if that does end up happening. So let's see here. So Chris Johnson says, I just put new tires on my 2008 FJ Cruiser. Pressures are at spec, including the spare, but the tire pressure light is still blinking or on. Is there a way to reset it? So Chris, if your light is blinking and then it goes on, like you start the truck, flashes, then it goes on, stays on, you have a problem. Possibly a broken sensor when the tires were replaced. Possibly, less likely, another problem in the system. Most likely something with the sensors. If you just had the tires on, the light was not on before, and now it is. There is a chance that this one sensor was broken during the process of replacing the tires. Look, things happen. But if that's the case, the shop would probably need to take responsibility for this because they broke it, fix it, and let's move on. But that flashing light means there's a problem, not necessarily something with the pressures. All right. So Domenico Russo says, I have a 2020 Camry SE 2.5, looking at getting the 18 XSE 3.5. What do you think? You know what, Dom? I wouldn't, because you have the newer one, and even though I know you want the 3.5, but if you're going to upgrade, I would get a 2021 XSE V6. I know it's a lot more expensive. The V6 is really nice in these cars, but as far as financial sense, look, I love all my viewers, and I agree that the V6 is very nice in that Camry, but you're going to lose a lot of money, and you're not going to gain something that's really, really worth all this loss. You have a newer car with a very nice engine that has plenty of power. Personally, I wouldn't, but that is up to you. So Gabe says, if you had a choice between a low mileage first generation Highlander 2007 and a low mileage second generation Highlander 2011, which one would you choose and why? So I personally love the 2007 generation. I think they didn't drive very well. They were all over the road and everything, but they were super reliable. The 2011 is a better year of the next ones, but people typically did not take care of, for some reason, did not take care of 2011 Highlanders as much as the original owners of 2007 did. Don't understand why. They're both really good cars. The 2007 will need a lot more maintenance, timing belt, and other things. The 11 will be less maintenance, but the 11, when things do go wrong, it's going to cost more because of the bigger engine and the way that engine is put in the car. The 2007 will be less costly to fix when things do go wrong. Folks, all these cars are getting older. Things will happen. Don't expect to buy a 2007 car and just drive it for another 10 years without doing anything to it. So yeah, if I was going to pick, I would honestly go with the 2011. For me, pulling an engine out of a car is not really a big deal to do a leak, an oil leak or whatever. But the 2007 is very reliable. I mean, overall, the reliability of 2007 will probably be a little bit ahead of the 2011, mainly because of overall cost of maintenance, of repairs, not maintenance. But I would be careful with low miles, though. If this is a rust belt car, low mile, less rust belt cars are terrible because they've just been parked all their life, just rotting away, and that's not good either. All right. So Daniel says, I heard online that if you buy a used Prius and disconnect the battery for 10 minutes, that the system will reset and start adjusting to your driving style for improved gas mileage. Depends. If it's an old Prius, perhaps, but if it's a newer Prius, most of the newer cars, when you disconnect the battery, it doesn't reset any memories for the computers, so you have to manually reset them. But honestly, if you're worried about resetting, most of these memories, if you're patient a little bit, give it a week or 2 or 3 of driving, they will readjust. But if you have a concern, like if it's a transmission and the transmission is not shifting right, resetting the memory will accelerate that. But if you actually drive it for 2 or 3 weeks, it'll do that on its own. Let's see here. What he says, hi there. Recently purchased 2011 FJ Cruiser in Chicago. Love it so far, but notice a lot of resistance when switching from too high to four too high to four high. Is this common? So I'm assuming when you say resistance, you have the manual shifter. Now, if you're doing this in cold weather and the truck's cold, it's gonna be hard, and they're usually not the smoothest shifting. There's not like a manual transmission. Transfer case will take a little bit of effort to shift, but honestly, I would have to see this one in person. You're in Chicago, maybe contact me. I'll have you stop by and we'll take a look at it and see. I just want to feel how much resistance, as that could be normal. Um, yeah, sweet truck you got there, by the way. So Ray Johnson says, when did Toyota start being consistently reliable? Was it always that way, or was there a tipping point in the history of the company? You know what? That's a very good question. Now, I only go back as far as some mid 80s with Toyotas. Not because I worked on them, but because personally I like those cars. And before that, I don't really have a lot of experience with them. Um, I don't think there was ever a tipping point. They were always reliable cars because that's their thought process. I've always been the same. Kaizen, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that word, continuous improvement. They take one thing and they don't just make a product and just call it a day. Now let's move on. They take that product that is already out and they continuously try to improve it. That's just the way Toyota has been from day one. That Kaizen deal has been there from day one. Um, I think they've always been reliable, and people recently, in the recent times, have said, "Oh, Toyota's gone down, the reliability is gone." They're not, but because they're not simple cars like before. So you have more stuff to break down, obviously. But when you compare them with their competitors of today, with today's technologies, they're still very reliable. I mean, some of these cars that just show up in the shop, they're just amazing when they show up with 200,000 miles and nothing, not a single drop of oil, nothing. That is very impressive still to see. So let's see here. So Torcello says, what's the anticipated lifespan of a new Toyota? 250K, 500K miles? Honestly, it could be 50,000 miles or it could be 500,000 miles. The key to every Toyota lasting that long, and folks who have had these cars for 4, 5, 600,000 miles, they didn't do so by luck. There's no such thing as luck with cars. They took care of them. You take care of these Toyotas, they're going to take care of you. You're going to have this car for a very long time without significant issues like original engine, original transmission. But don't expect these people that have these cars that long to just, oh, I'm just going to do the oil change whenever and never do anything else. They really take care of their cars. They spend a lot of money on their cars, taking care of them, and they don't cheap out on maintenance, on repairs. And let's say at 300,000 miles, when they have a massive oil leak, they're going to say, you know what? I'm going to spend $3,000-4,000 to fix this car because I want to keep it because this car has been great to me. But just by neglecting the car and not fixing anything that it needs, it's not going to last. Things will fall apart, and that's why the range will vary for people. You want to take care of the car, especially from day one, because that will pay off later in the life of the car. So Min Yugen says, I own a 2018 Camry XSE. It only has 796 and 69 miles parking in the garage, and I don't drive that much. Is it okay to sit for a long time, or do I have to start? I would start it once a week and take it for a drive. But more importantly, you got to keep up the maintenance by time here. Oil changes, 6 months, not even 5. You're not going to get to the 5,000 miles the first. I hope this car does not have the original oil because that wouldn't be good. That's 769 miles, no oil change. That's a 2, possibly 3-year-old car. I would consider changing the oil. All right, guys. So we're gonna wrap up the the live stream, I will take one, perhaps two questions. I'll take the last question. The last is always first, so I'll take the last question. Andrew says, what is your opinion at Nissan? I work at a Nissan dealership as a transmission technician, mechanic specialist, and my boss says Nissan is more reliable than Toyota. I want to say otherwise, but have to wait. Honestly, there was a time where I really liked Toyotas. Sorry, I really liked Nissans, and I thought they were really good products. But it seems like as we turned into the 2000s, things really went downhill. And people who work for Nissan, obviously, they will say Nissan is great because I understand they want to continue the product line. But you're a mechanic, you're a transmission specialist. How have these CVTs been? Not very, from what I hear, I don't work at a Nissan dealership. I wouldn't know the behind the scenes information like I do with Toyota. The CVT transmissions have a very bad reputation, and overall reliability have been in question. There's a lot of Nissans that everybody says you do not want to buy these things because they're terrible. They still make some good cars here and there, but unfortunately, their overall image has come down a lot over the years, and you probably see this more than I do. But as far as are they more reliable than Toyota? I don't think so, unfortunately. There was a time where they were comparable, but at this point, they're not, because Toyota comes out with a CVT and very little problems, almost no problems. Nissan had a good 10, 15 years of CVTs, and they still have issues. I don't know what the deal there is. I think Renault didn't do them very good, and that's unfortunate because I think they used to make really nice cars, and they still do here and there, but not the case like it was before. And I know, Andrew, I know you, Andrew. I know you're considering a switch to Toyota. Come on over, man. You're gonna love things here. Not as a transmission specialist, you'll be standing around a lot because we don't do a lot of those. All right, guys. So I'm gonna take one last question. So Nee says, and this is an interesting question. This is the first time a Toyota employee comes out and says this. I work at a Toyota manufacturing plant that builds the RAV4. I'm guessing that's a Kentucky plant. Uh, what are the most complaints or repairs on them? Something I can look into them at the manufacturing stages. Honestly, you would know this. We always make dealer product reports. On the dealership level, I don't see a lot of manufacturing issues with the RAV4 per se. Most of them are really engineering, in my opinion, like the fuel tank issue, like all the software stuff with the safety connect. But as far as manufacturing, I haven't seen much that I would say, ooh, this is. We probably had one or two body water leaks, but that's not something major, and they've been reported, and you probably have the paperwork there at the plant. But otherwise, if you are either from the Kentucky plant or the Canada plant, my hat's off to you, sir. You guys do phenomenal work, and I will always say that because I've been to one of these plants, and it's amazing. All right, guys. So we will wrap up the live stream. I would like to say thank you so much for joining the live stream. I really appreciate all your support for the channel. Everybody who put a super chat and a super sticker, I really appreciate your contributions. I am trying, folks, before we wrap up the live stream, let's talk about the channel a little bit. So I'm having some issues with the heating in my garage, and unfortunately, that's kind of put a few stop on the channel. But I'm hoping to get this fixed this week. I'm also hoping. You guys tell me. I'm hoping to make this live stream a very regular thing where we have it every other week, perhaps. I want to start with that. So in the next few days, I'm going to see what time works, and we're going to make this a regular schedule where it's set. This is the time where we have a live stream, so you guys will know and anticipate it. Until we make that announcement, until the next live stream or the next video, I wish you all the best. if you live in Chicago or in the area where it's freezing, I hope you guys stay warm, stay healthy. May the Lord bless you and keep you. And you guys have a wonderful day.